You're listening to Worshipology with Kurtis Parks, a biblical, practical, and spiritual conversation about living and leading worship. Let's lean into today's episode.
Well, hey, this is going to be the last episode of Spring 2023 Worshipology. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to be taking June and July off to do some recording, working on a few different projects, and traveling with the family. But don't you worry, we'll be right back in August with new episodes with more worship leaders, pastors, songwriters, creatives, musicians. So definitely stay in touch. On our show notes, you can find information on how to support Worshipology, including getting the Worshipology book at worshipologybook.com. I encourage you, pick up a book for yourself and pick up some for your team. It's a great way to grow community and grow your heart for worship as a team. You can also find out more at kurtisparks.com on how to support the show and stay in touch. I'm also on Instagram. Would love to connect with you guys over the summer. All right, here's my conversation with songwriter and pastor Chase Wagner. Today, I'm joined by an incredible creative mind, just a heart for the kingdom, heart for the church. Chase Wagner, say what's up, man.
What's up, man? Kurtis, thanks so much, dude. Thanks for having me on this.
Dude, so we were just catching up over the last 10 minutes before we hit record, and I think our paths crossed at least 9 years ago, just through a lot of different songwriting circles. Of course, we had Dan Rivera on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
A close friend of yours not too long ago. And but man, just for our listeners, why don't you just kind of share a little bit of your story? How'd you get started in songwriting and leading worship and even your faith story, man? What was that like?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, one, thanks for having me on the podcast. You are an incredible songwriter yourself, and so I'm honored to be here.
Thanks, man.
I'm originally from the Seattle area. Kind of when I was 14, 15 years old, I had a great youth pastor named Chad Veach, who was my youth pastor.
Oh, yeah.
And he was our youth pastor before he was with celebrities and doing his thing. Like, he was just a great youth pastor for like 10 years and taught me how to read my Bible when I was 14 years old. And I was, kind of in the emo, screamo, millennial era myself, you know what I mean? Like, and so he was like, hey, what if you, didn't do this and just for, shows, like what if you did this for church? And so, so really fell in love with what could creativity be in the church and all that sort of thing. And we started doing annual live records and kind of learned how to do that, to where when I was graduating college, our college pastor, Andrew Gard, was like, hey, I randomly got this job at this school called Southeastern University, SEU, in Lakeland, Florida. And he's like, I know it's on the opposite side of the nation, but would you want to come? They kind of want to have a youth culture. They want to start doing annual live records, that sort of thing. And I was like, random. I'm dating this Cuban girl from Central Florida, like randomly. And he's like, we'd pay you enough, you can get married, and whatever. So I was 22. So that was 10 years ago.
Wow.
That was 10 years ago, and yeah, man. So we made the move, and we saw God do some amazing things at SEU. Kind of just started doing annual live records there and working with students, and so many amazing students that just had such an impact on me, honestly. And we saw God do amazing things on campus. Lakeland's like kind of a college town, so there's multiple universities here, and so kids started coming on Monday nights, getting saved, baptized at a thing called First Chapel that we would do. And then Andrew and I were like, what if we didn't just do this for 18 to 22-year-olds, but we did this for the 14-year-old kid that I was, and
Wow.
the older people, and so we're like, let's start a church. So we started a church called Grace City Church 7 years ago, and kind of did both for a while, of being creative pastor there and worship director at the school. And then we were like, let's go all in church ministry. And so we've been doing that the last probably 5-6 years now, and just learning a lot. Kind of in the midst of that, kind of got into the writing thing. At church, our first EP was called Living with a Fire, and I'd stepped away from the big budgets and stuff of the school. We had started having like bigger budgets to do albums, and so we made our first live record in our chapel, of 300 people for Grace City, and we overdubbed it with one 414 microphone, everything on this this one mic and this one little M audio interface. Like, it's like church planning, like all you have like $100 a week, and it all goes to like batteries, like in your in your wireless pack. So like we're like, what if we want to still do music? And so we made a little EP called Living with a Fire. Somehow Banning Liebscher got his hands on it, and he cold called me, and he was like, dude, I don't know, you don't know who I am, but I have this band called Jesus Culture with Chris and Chris Kilala and Kim Walker, and I was like, yeah, I know who you are. And he was like, man,
yeah.
we'd love to this to be our next title track of our next record. Like, it's made a big impact on us. And so that kind of changed my life as a writer. It was nominated for a Grammy, the record was, and it was just kind of kind of opened doors for us and kind of our crew here in Lakeland. And so Lakeland's just kind of become its own, little mini Nashville as far as in the worship world. There's just so many between SCU and Grace City and Ryan Horton. There's a few other just like awesome just worship things happening in the city. And so it's been cool to see really God do that over the last 10 years.
That's amazing, man. And I want to pause the conversation because that's just such a inspiring story on like just that song and of course how it made its hands. But like, it's not like you guys were actively pursuing trying to get a song on a certain record.
Right.
Or maybe you were just trying to figure out like, hey, how do we do this here at home? How do we start a fire literally here at home?
Right.
And, I was just having this conversation with a guy, Kevin Weinbarger. He's a great, marketing dude in the music industry. And one of the things that he was just telling me was like, if you can't start something at home, nobody really, it's not going to catch fire in many other places, right? Talk about that a little bit, because you guys have literally stewarded a movement at Grace City that has gone beyond your walls, but the focus was always on like who God's put in front of you guys. Yeah. And I mean, just encourage us a little bit in that, in a world where it's like, it seems like so many people are trying to write that song and hit that next hit and just go bigger than what God has kind of called them to steward in the right now. How do you steward what God has given you and you're faithful to that while also realizing that, man, if he wants to take it beyond that, it's him? Great
question, Kurtis. Well said. I think it's so hard to believe in ourselves, right? It's so hard to believe in. There's so much there of like God believing in us, and we use words like called all the time, right? Like, I'm called to be a worship leader. I'm called to be a songwriter. And it's like, wait, do you really believe you're like called by a creator God of the universe to do something? It's like, none of us actually act like that. It's like we're all so insecure with ourselves. And so I think to be faithful with what we have in our hands and to just go, okay, I know I'm called to be, a worship leader. I felt that, like I talked about when I was 14, 15. And so like, whether it's $100 a week for the batteries, whether it's, tens of thousands of dollars for an album budget or whatever, it's like, go, man, what's God's put in my hands, and just being obedient. And, I love creating in the church in general, like I said, like, and whether a song never makes it on a record or never gets played outside of your church or never streams 1 million or never, wins an award, it's like, there's nothing like creating in the church that builds your team together and builds the church. Creativity builds the church, period. You know what I mean? And so that's just helped me with my teams, with volunteers, with building. So like with churches, like, man, let's always be working on something. Let's always be, because there's nothing like those rehearsals, those times in the studio that like really like bring you together as brothers and sisters too. You know what I mean? And so that's been really, it builds the church regardless.
Talk about that a little bit, because I think when you're talking to maybe just your standard pastor in America, creativity might not be the first thing that comes to mind in the thought of building a church and building the kingdom. How do you guys do that at Grace City? And, you and Pastor Andrew, y'all have been working together in this context for the last 7 years, like you just said.
Right.
What's that been like, as the worship pastor, as the creative pastor, working with a lead pastor so close in proximity as you guys have seen this thing grow?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what I've been so blessed with, is just the longevity of, Andrew was our college pastor. When Chad was a high school pastor, Andrew was a college pastor. So our relationship goes back to when I was 14, 15 years old.
Cool.
And so now, I'm 33 and we're still doing this thing together. And that really can't be replaced. I think there's something to say about being longevity with people, forgiveness, patience, and just learning to walk, like keeping a fence far from you to where you can really have relationships that obviously are far from perfect, but we get to reap the benefits of that, and I kind of say, yeah, Andrew's probably the last pastor I'm working for, because I don't want to do this again. Awesome. I don't want to start this thing over again. And so, yeah, man, I think that's obviously, as you know, because you've you've done so much in local church and lead pastoring and all that sort of thing. That's and if it's in Andrew's heart, it's in his heart as well. And if it's not, it's not. It's like if I could plan the greatest guitar solo of all time during So Will I. Like during So Will I, I could plan the greatest guitar solo. But it's like if that's not in God's heart, I mean, not in God's heart, in our lead pastor's heart, it's not in the cards. And so It's like it doesn't matter. It's like then it's not an awesome guitar solo. You know what I mean?
Cultivating a creative church, to not just in your call, but one of the things that I know you do so well just from talking to people is you cultivate that in others. You draw out the potential, you draw out the creativity. It's not the Chase Wagner show. It never has been. It's about, hey, how do we do this thing together? For those who are listening and maybe they're worship pastors or they're part of a worship team, how do you champion creativity in others? How do you cultivate that atmosphere where it's like, this is who we are, this is what we do, and you're a part of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, something that we've said over the last 10 years is like, just bring who you are to the table and be yourself to the maximums of going like, oh man, like when we started SE Worship, we were never like, oh man, it's going to become this thing that has this big pop sound, or it's going to become this thing or Grace City is going to be this thing that has, a lot of electric guitars out front, or has big, kind of anthemic stuff going on. It's like, we never thought that. It was more like, let's just all bring who we are to the table. You know what I mean? And if that's
that's so good.
The kid that has the gospel background, if that's the kid that has the Latin background, if that's the kid that, we're in Florida, so we have a lot of Latin stuff, like a lot of Latin influence and great Latin worship, Spanish speaking worship leaders, and kind of had that over the last 10 years at SEU as well. And so it was going like, just bring that to the table and, just be yourself to the maximum. It's like, we always tell our worship leaders, like, we don't need you to be something you're not. We just need more of you. We just need whoever you are, like turn that up 3 notches. You know what I mean? It's like, and I really think that about like all people that I respect. Like I'll go back to like Chad, who was my youth pastor growing up. Like, do I love how good of a preacher he is and how he can get into these Pentecostal runs, or like these, the way he communicates and can communicate about staff and like, is that what I love? Or do I just love him? Do I just love how tall he is and like his goofy glasses and his smile? It's like, oh no, that's what I love about him. You know what I mean? It's like, I've never met Joel Houston, but it's like, what do I love about Joel Houston? Do I love that he wrote The Stand and that he's written these, like he's won these awards, or he's like, led this global worship movement? Or do I just like how tall he is and his beard and his accent? It's like, no, I actually just like that. It's like, so it's like the essence of who we are individually. That's actually what inspires people, what like we're all kind of drawn to in each other. And so just telling our leaders, like, hey, figure that out for yourself and turn that up like, 3 notches, because that's what we need. We need you to just be, an exaggerated version of yourself. And that's worked really, really well for us.
One of the things that just kind of jumped out at me is that, we so often get so fixed on music and songs and set lists and all that comes with, just Sunday mornings, really. But at the end of the day, it's about people. Yes, you're talking about, do I love what he's done and all the accolades, or do I just love this guy? Do I just love Chad? Do I just love Andrew? Do I just love the people on my team? And we actually just had a team night last night, and our lead pastor actually came and shared with our team. And, he was like, hey, man, leading well is done from your strengths, but loving well is done from your weaknesses and the vulnerability and the authenticity. And how have you seen that, especially working so closely with Gen Z and students? And, because I think, there's two mindsets. There's like this old dictatorship mindset, but what I'm seeing is more of this democratic mindset where people do just exactly what you talked about, inviting voices to the table. Hey, be you. I love that. Turn it up 3 notches, like we need you to be you. And you got a seat at this table. How do you do that so well? And what's a challenge that you can issue, Chase, just on how we can love better as worship teams, worship leaders, but more than that, just as followers of Jesus?
Yeah. There's a new documentary that just dropped on Hulu, and it's all about it's called The Secrets of Hillsong. I wouldn't recommend it to people in the church because I feel like it's at the end of the day, it kind of tears down. It's a deconstructionist thing. You know what I mean? It just tears down church and goes like, you kind of leave going, well, is church a good thing? Yes, it's a good thing. I think church is a really good thing. But something that was great in the documentary, I would recommend the documentary to all staff people. I think there's so many PR lessons. There's so many. If you're a leader, I wouldn't recommend it to the layperson in the church, but if you're a leader, I think it's a must watch because there's just so many lessons. And one of them is they have a therapist and kind of someone that analyzes churches in the documentary professionally. And that person's like, when growth and the importance of growth surpasses the care for people, that's when we have a problem in nonprofit. You know what I mean? It's like, that's kind of where and I think that, like, man, that's such a good, like, when the growth matters more than the people, the importance put on that surpasses the care for people. That's when things go sour. And so I think there's nothing wrong with wanting our churches to grow or our nonprofits to grow or our bands to grow or the reach of our music to grow. All that stuff is fun and should be fun. And that's the dreams that God's like put in our hearts. But when that stuff surpasses the ultimate care for people and the importance of caring for people on our teams, that's when things go sideways, right? And I was like, man, that's such a great, that really affected me. And I was like, that's such a great lesson. And it's so true. And do we do it right all the time? Like, no, like that, like we get it wrong a lot of the time. And do we drop balls a lot in caring for people? Like, yes, like all the time. And do I do that personally? Like, yes, but like to the best of my ability, am I caring for people? We say at Grace City a lot, like Grace, we're working on plans for like our first building that we've ever built, which is like so we always just rented and leased. And so working on plans, and we were working with the architect, and he said, Chase, like, how would you describe, Grace City maybe in 2 words, like Grace City music, like to what you do? How do you describe that? Maybe 2 words. And I was like, honestly, creativity and hospitality. And I was like, and it's kind of a 50-50 split of like, I need the space in this new building, like obviously for the creativity, because that's what God calls to do. But the other half, I need everything to be centered around hospitality, taking care of the 40 leaders that come to church every Sunday and help me do, worship and production. Like the hospitality has to be at least on the same level, and giving them, we have a volunteer-based culture. And I'm not saying that's the only way to do it. If you pay your musicians, that's so rad too. Like do that. We have a volunteer-based culture, and so we have mom and dads and people that are there when they're one day of their weekend at church. And so how are we giving them an awesome experience, and how that they leave going, man, that was such a great, we're doing 4 services now on a Sunday, and it's like, how do I make this not feel like a nightmare? And how do I make them leave going like, this was so special, and I can't wait for next week. So those are just things that are on my mind.
Man, I love that. In all my years of talking with worship teams, worship leaders, I don't think I've ever heard creativity placed right next to hospitality. And I think one of those things that we're finding out, because kind of in a similar vein, Chase, like we just went to 4 services. We're trying to find ways of, making our team feel known, cared, and loved. Yeah. And I think that's the big thing, right? It's like the hospitality side of it. It is a spiritual gift, and I think I know why. But my wife like thrives in hospitality. Like if you're coming to our house, like we're gonna have fun if you come and hang with me, but you're gonna get fed and cared for if you hang out with my wife, right?
Of course.
And so I think the cool thing is like even now I'm gonna have an aha moment, because like I think our marriage is built with creativity and hospitality working together. But what I think is so key for the worship leaders listening is that it's so easy to get in this mindset, right? Where it's like, man, what can people do for me? Man, we just auditioned this great guitarist. When's the next time he can play? Because it's going to sound amazing. Or, wow, we got a drummer who not just locks in with the click, but brings like some dope ideas to the table. When's the next time we can get him on for how he can play? Right. But I think what they're looking for is not necessarily, oh, how can I get my creative energy out? It's how can I belong to something that's bigger than just me? Totally. How can I feel like a part of a family? Talk about that a little bit, because it really does seem. Now, I've never personally visited Grace City, but from what I've heard and from what I see, it really does feel like family. Thanks, what do you guys do to create that atmosphere? And then even let's talk a little bit about discipleship, right? Because like you got such an opportunity to disciple young leaders and moms and dads and people from all walks of life through the gift of worship. Like, what does discipleship and family look like in a culture like Grace City, Chase?
Yeah, absolutely. I think on that culture side, and Chris Hodges wrote a book called Fresh Air, maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago. It was when we were planning the church, and it's all about the breath of God, and it's all about, does every room feel like fresh air? Does when you walk into my rehearsal, does it feel like fresh air? When you walk into the green room, does it feel like fresh air? Does it feel like the Spirit of God? Like, and that was just a really practical thing that we thought about early on, and fighting for that, right? Like fighting for like, man, I'm not going to walk on eggshells around this person. If this person makes me feel crunchy, it's like we're gonna have a chat. You know what I mean? And like really, and not being overly aggressive, not like in an aggressive way, but like in a, hey, let's protect this. Like let's protect how our rehearsals feel and how our services feel, and that's been really, really important to us for sure.
Man, that's so cool, because I think in a day and age where, you can easily get in that eggshell mentality. I think, you just mentioned the Hillsong documentary, and I think the spirit of offense is at an all-time high.
Oh, no
right?
doubt.
I mean, it's almost like people are there's the cynical lens that sadly has crept into the church, and I think, man, like, we don't really have. I just read this book by Brant Hansen, and it's really challenged me to never get offended. You know, like it's almost like Jesus laid down the right to get offended. Like even when he was, literally they encountered the woman caught in the act of adultery. Jesus wasn't offended by that. Like
right.
He loved her in that moment and called her to greater things. And I think, it's so easy to get caught in the spirit of offense, especially on worship teams. Well, I didn't get to lead that song that I love.
No doubt.
Oh man, they set me off the team because I'm of whatever. I mean, and the laundry list can go on and on and on. I mean, dude, how do you, maybe, and this is something totally out of left field, Chase, but I think I can gather from just hearing, like with the spirit of grace comes a spirit of joy.
Right.
And I think when you find a church that just there's a joy, like you talked about fresh air, like you're walking into rooms, there's that fresh air feel. Like there's not a spirit of offense there. Like I don't think offense can exist where there's fresh air.
Sure.
Like how do you keep that? And then maybe even let's lean back into like your songwriting. Like how do you write songs that inspire people to live with joy and to pursue grace and hospitality and creativity? How do you write songs that basically say this is a space with fresh air?
I think that if, going back to the offense thing, if I pivoted my life, or I took a hard left or a hard right every time I got offended, I would have never been able to build anything over the last 10 years. You know what I mean? Like SEU worship would have never happened. The Grace City would have never happened. The music would have never happened. I would have never signed as a staff writer at a label. Like, I don't know, like if every time you get offended, you make a left or a right turn hard, you just don't have the longevity to build anything of substance, And I've known that, like in my life, of just going, man, like God, I want to build something. And I haven't always got the timing right, Like honestly, I haven't always got the timing right, but to the best of my ability, like God, I want to build something. I know that takes time to put roots down. I know it takes time to build something real. And then I think when you are offended, like it's okay to get offended. And some of the things, going back to that documentary, there's a lot of real things to get offended about, and there's a lot of things that that church messed up on. You know what I mean? A church that I love, and a lot of people in it that I love personally and know personally. Yeah. But when those things happen, and I think so many leaders at that church, led that way as well. That's why you have so many amazing leaders coming out of Hillsong, is that you let it kind of inform your mind. You know what I mean? When I'm offended, I'm going to go, I'm going to forgive this, but I'm also informed about the future. But I'm not going to jerk the wheel to a hard left, hard right. I'm going to let it just kind of, inform me on my future roadmap. I'm going to let it, inform me and just keeping everything de-escalate. My pastor's so good at de-escalation. You know what I mean? He's so good at just like, when people come in upset or XYZ about whatever, or even just, terrible things happening in families or whatever. Like I've learned so many great lessons from Pastor Andrew. Like, and one of those is just de-escalation, of just being like, man, can we we de-escalate things and just see things as they are and let them inform us on the future? That's really huge, and I think an important and a way of overcoming offense.
I'm going to be chewing on that for a little. De-escalation, the art of de-escalation. That sounds like a book title right there, man.
Let's write it.
Dude, it's so good. Well, I mean, here's the deal. It's like, and we hear this all the time in the church world. You can be a thermostat or you can be a thermometer. One
Correct.
sets the temperature,
Correct.
one takes the temperature.
Correct.
And I think that's the art of de-escalation, right? It's like one of the things that Mark Batterson so brilliantly brought up when we were talking last was, I can be an anxious presence, or I can be a peaceful presence.
Yeah.
One's going to raise the temperature, one's going to bring it back down and cool things out. And I mean, literally, that's the definition of de-escalation, right? It's like bringing things down to a chill level. It's not everything is an emergency. Not everything
absolutely
is something that's going to cause you to leave the church.
Yep.
And man, that's so good, dude. Well, Chase, I got to ask this because obviously. You've not just written songs with Jesus Culture, but with so many different artists, Leland, I mean, the list goes on. As a songwriter, where are you pulling from inspiration, like right here, right now? And especially when it comes to being a staff writer on a label, and maybe explain that role a little bit for people that, what does a staff writer do? Because you're constantly in that songwriting mode. How do you find fresh inspiration continuously? And then, B, what does that look like to be a staff writer with a record label?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So the idea of a staff writer would be, you're part of a small team for that label working to help their artists find their best songs. And so I always come to the party with some cookies. You know what I mean? I always come. I don't.
I love it.
I don't come to the party without some cookies. And so for me, I'm just always going, what's in my cookie jar? And what's and I think to me that's melodies, that's a running note on my phone of Bible stories, or maybe it's a cool title, or maybe it's a cool idea, and maybe always kind of trying to curate a list of 15 to 20 of those, and to where I can when I walk into a room with usually a pretty anointed person, like some of that's God's already doing sometimes not. But
there's the other side.
But a lot of times, pretty anointed person, God's doing something, pretty. You brought up Leland, like, man, God's doing something amazing in his life. So when I get into the room with him, it's like, man, what do I have that could fan his flame, or like, and then sometimes they're not interested and they got this other idea and they just need that idea fleshed out. And they have a chorus that they want to kind of bring into a whole. They need help on the verse. They're stuck on a bridge. XYZ. So that's a fun part of my life, man, and I've been really, really grateful for, and is definitely a gift. And you gotta have. We go back to that self-confidence thing, right? Like the best leaders on my team, the best like people, and I'm preaching to myself when I walk into those kind of like rooms, is like 100% confidence, 100% humility, like living in that. Living the best leaders I know, they're 100% confident, they're 100% humble, because I'm a pretty insecure person. You know what I mean? Naturally, I'm not like the fine arts champion, as a kid, or like growing up, like winning contests.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like I'm a pretty insecure person. So just like looking at the life of David and looking, at the way he lived as a conquered king, man. He talks about he's been conquered by the presence of God when he marched, the Ark of the Covenant back into the holy city, and he was naked and he was dancing. Like he was just giving this whole thing of saying, man, I've been conquered. The Ark represented the presence of God. And he's saying, man, I've been conquered. He's like, I'm going to rule as a conquered king. And I really want to live that way too. In the writing rooms, as a pastor, as someone else that is submitted to pastoral authority on a team. It's like, man, I'm just trying to live in that 100% humble, 100% confident mode, and that's much easier said than done, especially in certain writing rooms.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, dude, talk about some of the inspiration that you're pulling from. Are you just constantly living in the Psalms? Are you listening to sermons and like taking down lyric fuel? Or are you just kind of like any given moment the idea strikes? You're one of those voice memo guys. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, exactly.
When just kind of capturing the creativity.
Yeah, totally. I think I have definitely a download, from heaven, as far as like always just trying to get melodies into a phone, or just randomly that kind of stuff happening all the time. But I think Also, there's just there's an idea of common grace, right? That God's revealing his goodness, and every good and perfect thing comes from above. So like even in secular music, there's a lot of awesome things happening. And so I used to say, like, man, when I got writer's block, I'd go to a Walmart and buy a CD or whatever, but it's like no one buys CDs anymore. So I think like for me, it's like going to, the top 50 global playlist on Spotify or top 50 USA. Wow. And just going like, what's God doing in music outside of Christian music, and where's the goodness, and what's the things that could maybe inspire me and get me past my own writer's block. I'm in so much church, so I wish I would say it was sermons, but I'm in, like you said, you got 4 services, I got 4 services. I'm in so much church. I don't usually listen to like sermons outside of church, and then with Christian music, like I'm trying to have a unique voice in that too. So I try not to listen to too much of it. Maybe like Christian rap. I really like. There's some really good Christian rap happening. So I listen to that. But like I don't really listen to Christian music because I want to have a unique voice and not be too overly influenced by others.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you listen to so much of the genre that you're aiming for, you just become white noise.
Right.
It's
You're right.
Like,
exactly.
How is this any different than anything else?
Exactly.
Oh man, that's so good. Well, dude, Chase, this conversation has been not only inspiring, but really challenging in many ways. And, one of the things I've been asking everybody that's been a guest this year is, man, what's the Holy Spirit speaking to you right now? If it could be something just personal that you're just kind of letting marinate in your own life, or it could be something that you feel like the Holy Spirit has given you one of those downloads that's like, man, maybe this is for the body of Christ at large. What's he speaking to you right now?
Yeah, I think you'll feel this too. I think there's a presence-oriented thing happening right now, and more than performance-oriented thing, and I think that's what's happening in the church, and it's not even like loud and crazy. It's like reverence. It's like the fear of God. That is happening. I feel like in churches and in worship movements right now across America. It's no longer about the lights. Turn the lights down a little bit. Turn the flashers down. Turn movers down. Turn the house lights up a little bit. There's like a really special thing happening that people just want. Look at what happened at Asbury. Like there's some really special things happening across America right now that don't have to do with performance. And so if I'm speaking to any kind of leaders, like, don't get in your head about performance. Like, don't get in your head about, man, is the mix just right? Is the lighting the way I want it to look like? And really go after the presence of God. And more so than that, that's kind of, people are sometimes like, well, what does that mean? It means take care of the people on your team. It means like taking care and making sure that they're close, that I'm a good representation of a pastor to them, that I'm living an example to them week in, week out. Like there's something really pure happening right now, I think, across the nation in that way. And that's what I'm sensing. And I'm sure you can relate.
Absolutely, man. That's so good. It's such a great reminder. It's the production and presence balance has always been part of the conversation, at least in our teams. And I think you are seeing that. You're seeing a hunger for the presence of God. You're seeing a pursuit of the presence of God. And man, it's something that we can see in your writing. We can see happening at Grace City.
Thanks,
everything that you're a part of,
Thanks,
Chase, it's just inspiring, man. I'm excited to see this podcast hit ears and hopefully inspire more and more leaders to just actively pursue the presence of God. Thanks so much for your time, dude. It's been
right back at you, Kurtis. So fun. Thanks again.
You've been listening to Worshipology with Kurtis Parks. To learn more and to find resources for worship leaders and teams, you can visit kurtisparks.com.